Thank you so much for clicking play and joining me on this episode of She Got Next. I have noticed this about myself recently. I've become much more obsessed with figuring out or finding research about the data around this growth in women's sports. Luckily, my guest here today, that's what she does professionally, collecting, researching, posting reports, all this stuff. So I'm a bit obsessed. I just told Ellyn I'm obsessed with her. Her name, again, Ellyn Briggs. She's the senior brands analyst and data reporter. I'm going to try to chill out. Again, I'm excited to have you, Ellyn. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and love the energy and excited to chat about all the data that is, that we have showing the case for women's sports in so many different ways. So
yeah. I've been a bit obsessed with it because I'm like, why now? What's happening right now that's making people so obsessed with it? Yeah. So before I even dive into that, I want to admit that you've done so much. There's so many articles that you've published, insert headlines here, everyone, that I'm like, this stuff is so fascinating to me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about yourself right now. Your work and commentary have been featured on outlets like NBC News, The Wall Street Journal, Business Insider, Awful Announcing, and Front Office Sports. And because you've done all of those things, it was kind of hard for me to think of the story arc for a conversation. Like, where do I start? I want to talk about all of it. And as you just mentioned, women's sports has been booming and I've been obsessed with it and finding out why. So let's just start there. This show is about women in sports, but I do want to talk about the research you've done around women's sports. So it's almost a year out now since you published for Morning Consult, another outlet that you work for, the 2025 Sports Marketing Guide. And there are two kind of key findings, takeaways that I want to pull out and just have a discussion about.
For sure, let's do it.
So the first one, women's sports hype is real.
Yes.
The WNBA is now more popular than men's sports. A couple of men's sports leagues, namely Major League Soccer and the PGA, plus women's sports fans are young, diverse, and uber engaged. The other key finding that you have is this one. This is what Ellyn wrote, everybody. The athlete influencer era is here. Americans find athletes nearly twice as likable as social media influencers, and athletes are taking advantage of that. Now, I'm not a professional in any of this. This is pure vibes. Here are the vibes that I'm getting. Those two things in my mind are connected.
Absolutely.
The fact that women's sports are growing and this whole athlete era influencer are growing. And I think it's because of these women athletes that the athlete influencer has grown to become, again, more influencing than our average influencer.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that connection. Like, you get the vibes. Is that true?
100% the vibe is accurate. And I'm so glad you brought that up because something that I'm like a personal and professional obsession of mine is just the NIL era, right? So that NIL in college athletics became a thing in 2021. So that's when athletes could start making money. And you see the graduating class of 2024 last year, where you had stars like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Cameron Brink. That was really in our research in Morning Consult where we saw the spike. Once those women got drafted, there was already positive buzz, like engagement. Users were already trending upwards slightly for the WNBA in the previous years, really since 2020. But when that draft class entered the league, everything kind of just went gangbusters exponentially from there. Now, I'm focusing specifically on women's basketball here, but we could say the same thing for a lot of different sports. But if you look at their collegiate careers, they kind of were freshmen or sophomores when the NIL era arose and when they could start profiting off their name, image, and likeness. And so they spent 3-4 years in some cases building brands online for themselves, becoming businesses, even before they got to the league. So they carried all that momentum with them. They had built-in audiences that were already not only following them for the play on the court, but for everything from, fit checks to, workout routines, all the reasons that we love watching regular influencers, as you mentioned, is sort of amplified tenfold with athletes, because not only are they going, and getting a daily coffee, they're also going and, perfecting their bodies and crafts every day to become the best athletes in the world. So there's something really compelling about that. But to your point, yes, broadly speaking about women's sports and the rise of this athlete influencer era, women are always like, if any time you study, you look at social media, they make up a lion's share of influencers online. They're the beating heart of the creator economy. They're kind of we're natural posters. Not me, certainly. I wish I was a better short form video creator. But when it comes to who dominates the social media landscape in terms of followers, monetary, outcomes, it is by and large women in a lot of cases. And that's kind of a rarity in the history, right? In any sort of business or industry, if you want to look at it like that. but they are leading the charge on the field, off the field. So it's kind of the reason I brought the NIL up initially is just because when you look at that draft class, they had all those experiences being basically full-time influencers and full-time athletes for 3 years, and only now going into, you know, the professional levels of their sports, that is amplified. So 100%, the relationship is there. And, you know, as our world, I do a lot of research outside of sports as well. And sort of the big theme or takeaway of this year and last year really is that mainstream media consumption has kind of flipped. So it used to be that news, television was the main source of news and information consumption for the average American. Now it's very much social media. So if you're on social media and, you know, getting your message out there, which a lot of athletes are, a lot of women athletes are, you're certainly going to be reaching a lot of people and find a lot of new fans and audiences.
Well, there's so many things that you just mentioned. I'm like, oh, let's talk about that next. So let me go with the last thing that you mentioned about finding women on social media. And that's how you're getting these influencers and their audiences growing. You're getting your news from them, what to buy, what salad, what workout gear. You published an article in June for Front Office Sports. It was titled "Women's Sports Bars Are on the Rise. Survival Isn't Guaranteed." Yes. And this is another thing that's been highly discussed, this fact that there are women who are finding some folks to invest in them, creating these spaces where women can come together. Of course, they can't discriminate against any population, right. But what they have on the screen is purely women's sports. Mm-hmm. And what I found fascinating about that article was I didn't even think about the additional costs those owners have to pay because women's sports are so inaccessible. Yep. Like right now, if you're an NFL fan, NBA fan, you have to, you know, subscribe to Netflix and Peacock and Prime and all those places to get football games, but you can still pretty much, those are like common platforms where you can see that content being streamed in addition to the big networks, CBS, Fox, NBC. But women's sports, it's you're going on a hunt to find where those games can be played. And there are these platforms that are up and coming. There are a lot of names. I'm like, I didn't know this platform existed. Right. And maybe they're streaming from Australia. I'm like, I got to get up at 3:00 in the morning to watch this game. But it's an additional cost that these owners have to pay to even just have women's sports broadcasted and create that space. And that I found that fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And it's something kind of reflective. It's a small specific, point that is reflective of the broader theme that I got from a lot of my conversations with the women and folks who are opening these women's sports bars across the country now. Really, a few years ago, it was just on the coast in kind of these uber progressive cities like Seattle, New York. Now we've got like Kansas City is emerging as kind of a women's sports hub right in the heartland of the country. They've got, their amazing soccer stadium that was just purpose built for women as well. But there is just, even though there's so much momentum and heat, kind of as it's a kind of an industry jargon term that we use to describe when something's trending and, on the up and up, so to speak, even though there's so much heat and excitement around women's sports right now, there's still so many like systemic industry or, just systemic, I guess is the best word, obstacles for whether it's athletes, for business owners, just getting the biggest thing from all my conversations with those women were getting the initial funding was extremely hard. Now, opening a bar or restaurant is notoriously a hard business. So it's
super hard.
Like banks and like friends and family are running to give people money to start bars and restaurants anyways. But when they came to investors with the idea of a women's only sports bar, they were met with pretty much immediate pushback about, is this really needed? What's the business case for this? How is this sustainable long-term? Is this kind of just like a 1-year thing while the WNBA is really hot? So there's literal costs, like adding all of these streaming services that you don't even know the names of, and that you got to have it on weird times, to more metaphorical or non-literal costs of just the time and energy you have to spend to get buy-in, to get people to invest in, and see your mission. And that was ultimately the deal breaker for a lot of them too, when they felt they've had someone willing to say yes. They were wanted to make sure that the mission was aligned there and they weren't just saying yes for some other reason. So it is, there's all sorts of, as much as we talk about like women's sports is on the rise, there are still just so many disparities and just, and that will come with time. It's still such a nascent industry. Even if you think like 2020, 2021, I think it was 2021 or 2022, even when the NCAA women's tournament went viral for having like the weight room be in some janky hotel conference room. There was like 3 weights on the floor and like 1 bench press. So, it's easy to lose sight of like the long arc of history when the last few years have been so abundant. But certainly there's all sorts of obstacles for all sorts of business owners. But it's really, I mean, it's really cool to see that the women's sports movement or, the interest in women's sports is so large that people are opening up dedicated spaces in their communities for it. So I think it's just a testament to the reality of the situation, as well as as much as they might be facing obstacles to get up and running. But there's been like 6 or 7 now that have been around. The Sports Bra in Portland was the first one. I believe they opened up in late 2022. And they're just going gangbusters. So
yeah, they're growing all over the place. Yeah, and they've had some investment from, I like to call him Serena Williams' husband.
Yes, that's who he is. That's literally how I know him, how I became aware of him. So Serena Williams' husband, shout out to him for doing, good work there.
Yeah. Shout out to Alexis. Yeah. Well, one thing that you mentioned, like in the article, there are a couple of things that kind of stood out to me. We've been discussing these hurdles that don't naturally come to mind. Like, oh yeah, you need the bandwidth that's different than regular sports. Men's primary sports. But also it's interesting that it has jumped the way that it has. Like you said, in 2021, we're still kind of in the COVID era. Everyone's watching a lot of television. Women's sports has been growing. And I think college women's basketball has always had, well, I shouldn't say always, but they've had a good number of eyeballs. It was really about whether or not you can convert those fans from college into the WNBA. And like you said, that particular class of Angel and Caitlin and some other folks, it kind of turned the tide. And I think it was like the rivalry from college helped in and extended into the professionals. And it's very similar with the NBA back in the day. It was like Larry Bird and Magic, big competition in college. And when they got to the NBA, those fans went with them. But just with these sports bars, in the article that you wrote, it said like there were no female sports bars, or should women's sports bars, only women's sports in 2021. And at the end of 2025, it's expected to have 25 across the country. And I'm like, I don't know personally if I need, as a person who's been a fan of sports my entire life, I've never really thought about the need for just women's sports being played at a bar. But I've been in DC for a few months now. And last Saturday or 2 Saturdays ago, I'm losing track. The NWSL had their championship game held out in San Jose. And the Spirit, obviously, were in the finals. And I'm in DC. So like I went to a sports bar down the street. I walked in and I said, which TV is going to play the game? I want to sit next to the TV. And they're like, oh, it's going to be on multiple televisions here. And I'm like, oh yeah, like that's great. Obviously, I'm in the city where the team that's in the championship is playing, so that helps. But I have noticed there's been an increase in some of those sports bars turning on women's sports, but they have to have access to that stuff too. And I don't know if they're investing in those other networks or they're waiting for it to be on, some of the major networks. But I'm excited about the evolution of it.
Yeah. And that's a question I asked the owner operators. I was like, are you concerned, as I'm a regular sports fan as well. I go out to bars and I see women's sports, whether it's soccer, volleyball, even, certainly women's basketball, collegiate and professional, have been trickling onto TVs more and more without people having to ask, which is great. I wondered, is that a concern of yours competition wise? Like if regular sports bars or traditional sports bars start showing women's sports with parity, what a novel idea.
Yeah.
Is that going to harm your business or like kind of erase the need for your space? And they were wholeheartedly, the answer was no. They, believe just like there's 5 to 10 sports bars in any average town, there's room for one more that caters specifically to women. And, to folks that just want to gather there for a lot of the spaces or owners that I talk to host a lot of different events around education about women's sports, just go the extra mile that maybe the regular bar owner wouldn't. But yeah, I mean, it's great to see again, just another stamp of approval that women's sports are mainstream. Like they are here. And, like you mentioned the Larry Bird example, once something's mainstream, it's hard for it to, for especially sports wise in America, for it to go back down. Certainly like brands ebb and flow, obviously, but it is here, which is, I think that was the biggest hurdle to get over. So it's awesome to see even, your average sports bar guy being willing to watch the NWSL championship. And I went to school in DC and lived there for 5-ish years in total. So I love DC.
Oh, nice. No, another thing that you mentioned in the article, you included this data point. 2025 research suggests that women's sports fans are more engaged than general sports fans on several fronts, including online content consumption, in-person game attendance, and merchandise purchasing.
Yes.
First, help me. Like, I know we've been saying, and because again, both of us are longtime sports fans, we say things like regular sports, but I think we know what we're talking about here. But help me understand, like, when you are thinking about writing reports around this data, first help me understand the distinction between women's sports fans and general sports fans. Is it the whole regular thing that we're saying?
Yes. So in in our surveys, we will ask there's different questions that we ask at the top of the survey to identify people in certain buckets. And I believe for that particular survey, it's been a year now, so don't quote me exactly on this. I can go back to the survey and pull it up here. But if they had to say that they were an avid fan of at least one women's professional sports league. So we usually do not a fan, casual fan, avid fan. Avid fan is kind of the marker where it's like, okay, this person is tuned in, they really care. Whereas maybe if we don't count the casuals just because, I'm a casual sports fan, like all sports. But if someone takes the extra second to mark avid fan for the WNBA or the NWSL, that gives us a pretty good indication that they are a women's sports fan. And then for all sports fans or regular sports fans, that is inclusive. We give them a whole list of, men's and women's professional leagues, and they have them say, are you an avid or casual fan of any of these? And so it is lumping in women and men's professional sports together, the all sports fan marker. But so the women's sports fans are specific. They said, yes, I'm at least an avid fan of one professional women's sports league. But yes.
Gotcha. That's helpful. Oh my God, what is a general? Am I a general? Yes, I'm a general because I like both categories. Okay. One thing I want to, again, kind of think through the way that you described how women's sports fans kind of interact with sports beyond just watching. It's the consumption, it's going to in-person events. And I was kind of thinking about this. I'm like, is it because it's new? Is it just because it's new? I mean, obviously the WNBA has been around for 29 years. So that is not new. The NWSL is 12 years, but it still feels new to so many people. And I'm like, is this why we're seeing women's sports fans of women's sports show up the way that they are? It's the new factor.
I think yes and no. Certainly, in 5 years, we might see those numbers dip a little bit once everyone is settled in their women's sports fandom and there's less like we need to get out there and, take to the streets and support everyone constantly. I hope it never dies down like that. And, quite frankly, like regular sports, men's sports, like you see every year, the viewers, at least for the NFL, the viewership numbers grow, the attendance numbers grow. So hopefully we're on the right path there. But I think more it has to do with the demographics of what a typical women's sports fan looks like. They're younger, which means they're inherently more online. Like I think Gen Z over indexes on women's sports fandom for all of the leagues that we test or ask about way more than, so like Gen Zers are more likely to be women's sports fans than the general population. So that online consumption right away, they're on their phones, they're watching all the TikToks, they're watching everything. They're loving it. And then they're more diverse as well. So less likely to be, more likely to be non-white, let's say. And so I think both of those things, just when you pair sort of, there's just enthusiasm across the board with those groups to support women's sports, whether it's just online, whether it's going to games, whether it's buying merch. I actually just saw another data point, really, I think it was from Boardroom, but again, don't quote me on that. They looked at average sort of holiday spending for fans of each of the major leagues, women's and men's, and WNBA fans were the highest spending across the board, even higher than all of the men's leagues. So, they're putting their money where their mouth is. And that's not, I don't think that spending was necessarily like explicitly on women's sports, apparel or merch. I think it was maybe across all of holiday categories, but they've got money, they've got discretionary income, and they're spending it on their women's sports fandom. And I think, that's always important to have an engaged consumer. That's kind of how you get that heat that I was talking about and continue an upward trajectory. And there will be one more point before I'll stop talking after this, but once a brand like
don't stop talking, Ellyn. Like this is the
when you think about really big, huge brands that have been around forever, Coca-Cola. You can only get so big at some point. Like they maybe 99% of Americans know what Coke is. 95% of Americans drink Coke regularly or have drank a Coke in the past. At that point, like the growth gets smaller each year because there's no more people to introduce yourself to. So hopefully the WNBA will and all women's leagues will reach that at some point. But that's something to think about. As brands get bigger, the growth gets slower just because they're more saturated out there in the world. But certainly I think it's a combination of the newness factor, the excitement around it. There's new personalities to learn. Like when you first become a fan of any sport, it's kind of always one of the best parts is doing a deep dive and learning that so-and-so used to coach here and he was actually drafted by this team originally. And there's all this like lore behind, the present day leagues and everything as it stands. So I think that there's a lot of that going on, but certainly there's the young, diverse consumer base of women's sports fandom helps as well.
I've had to come to terms with the fact that I'm not necessarily the target market for some of these teams because I'm like I know about Coke, so Coca-Cola, everybody.
Right. I should use a different brand.
But it was like initially when I'm thinking like it's this newness factor, which isn't bad that it's new to so many people. But when I think like I'm a Yankees fan, I've talked about that a lot on the show. Like I'm a Yankees fan. So the Yankees hat that I wear is 10, 15 years old. When I go to games,
they don't have to sell you anything yet. You're already bought it. Yes.
They're looking at the new person, and like so, these brands continue to advertise and market and put themselves out there because people are being born every day. So they got to get a new fan on there. But it would be interesting. It will be interesting when the WNBA becomes, synonymous with like Coca-Cola, WNBA. Like, of course, these are the brands that are lasting and ingrained in us.
For sure, absolutely.
Now, in November of this year, just 6 weeks ago, so you published a report for Morning Consult called America's Sports Consumption and Behaviors. And in your summary, you wrote this. I have so many things written down here, Ellyn, so I'm just going to have to read from my phone.
I love hearing my words back to me now.
Americans have never been widely synonymous with the traits that athletic success often requires. Like physical fitness. But this image may soon be due for an update, at least according to your intelligence data. And we were kind of talking about this earlier in the conversation in that, Gen Z, they're online and they're watching workout routines and what kind of things these athletes are buying to stay in shape or eat healthy or makeup that doesn't spread or run down your face when they're running up and down the court or the field. But it's interesting to me because you also include this data point about post-pandemic that people have been much more interested in getting healthy since the pandemic, and their activity is all like athletic based. Like everyone's on this like active hunt to incorporate not just watching sports, but then imitating them, going out and joining clubs and run clubs. And I think was just interesting for me to find out. I'm like, it's not just that women's sports are growing. It's that all of us as Americans anyway, not all of us, a big chunk of us are now more interested in being healthier. And it's so funny that before it's like you can watch all these sports on your couch and eat 7-layer dip and drink your beer. But now it's like we also kind of want to look like the guy or the girl that's an athlete. I'm interested in learning about what you thought about that data coming in.
Absolutely. So that report is kind of a summary of my sort of pet project that thankfully my editors have let me pursue with various reports. We don't normally publish as much sports content as we do at Morning Consult, that is, as we have in the past 18 months, 2 years now. That's all driven by me. But back in last summer, I think it was like June or July of 2024, I just had this hunch that from the TikToks I was seeing, from the ads I was getting, like that Americans were getting sportier. I just kept kind of having that idea in my head. That was like the headline that I was looking at. I was like, let me go into our data. So you mentioned intelligence data. At Morning Consult, we survey thousands of consumers in every country, but in the US especially, every single day, not only about brands, that they like, purchase. We ask about what brands they were aware of, like, purchase from, but also about their kind of daily habits. So, how much are you ordering from delivery services every week? How much alcohol do you drink? One of the questions that we ask is, how often do you exercise or practice or play sports? And so I went into our intelligence dashboard and, piped it in, and I saw the trend line since 2021, when we first started asking the question, has gone kind of steadily up each year in relation to that question, how often do you play or practice sports? And the weekly number that is, so at least once a week, the share of Americans who say that since 2021, I believe it's up 12 or 14 points among all adults. It's growing faster among young people, so Gen Zers, and women especially as well. So it's rare we see that kind of, it doesn't sound like that much, 12 or 14 percentage points, but our sample size is so large because we're surveying thousands of people every day. Over years, that stacks up to millions. So our margin of error is like 0.0002 or something like that. So when you have that much growth, okay, there's actually a trend. Something's going on here. So people are getting sportier. It's people of all ages, all genders. Again, certainly young people and women especially have increased their exercise and practice and playing of sports over the last few years. But we see it reflected through so many different industries, not just women's sports fandom in general has grown as well, but so much of marketing today, whether you're a company that's selling, soda. Now that we have protein, look at Starbucks. They just had released a protein cold foam. I haven't tried it yet. It's a little too out there for me. I think I want my cold foam to like be full of sugar and no protein at all. But the interest in wellness and kind of fixation on personal development is coming through in messaging from so many different brands. But yeah, I think it's so interesting that certainly that you have to think of the pandemic as kind of a catalyst for that in terms of us all as Americans and around the world having kind of a reckoning of, okay, it's probably important to be pretty healthy. Yeah. And two, I think sports were some of the only accessible activities for a while there. Golf saw a huge boom because it was like you could go outside and be 6 feet away from each other naturally. And I played a lot of park basketball that year in 2020. I'd never really done that before. So I think people just picked up these habits. Obviously the COVID upended so many different industries, but in the now 5+ years later, some of the habits have stuck and for the better, which is awesome. And go in tandem with fandom as well. People are becoming athletes themselves, which is cool.
Yes. It's funny, like during COVID, it's like you were in one or two camps. You got a little heavier, a little lazier, or you got a little bit more active. And you might have
went through cycles. Yes.
Yes. I'm like, I started off getting a little heavier and then like, let me get my sport girl era going on. But yeah, I think, again, I thought that was just an interesting data point, like to think about the trajectory. Like so many people are moving in this direction and brands are like, yeah, we can change some formulas. We'll throw some protein in there and create all these different items and things to help you get healthier. And, they're always looking for ways to sell things to us, but it's just interesting that things have gone that way.
And I love watching too. I'm as a kind of marketing analyst, in addition to being a sports reporter and writer, I love analyzing what brands are partnering with sports leagues. And we've seen so many beauty brands. I think Glossier was really the first beauty brand to sponsor any professional sports league with the WNBA. I think it was 2021 or 2022. They've grown that partnership. Charlotte Tilbury, I believe, is a sponsor of, is it F1? It's one of the racing. Either way, there's like a merging of beauty brands in sports now, not just women's sports. We saw last year at the Super Bowl, there was a lot of women's focused, beauty focused brands advertising the Super Bowl, which you usually think is like beer and trucks, right, as the main advertisers for that game. So everything is, getting parity, some more parity across the board in terms of being fans of sports and being athletes themselves. So it's cool to, again, brands are always trying to sell something no matter what, but it's all moving in a positive direction for the sports world, at least for now.
Yeah, they're investing in women's sports. And I mean, that's what we're looking for. They're going to need that kind of support to grow and to get on some of those mainstream channels so we can have access to it. And in thinking about what you just mentioned, some of the brands that are not just investing in women's sports, the Sephora was a big supporter and investor in the Valkyries. And they just announced recently they're now going to be investing in the Warriors, which are kind of like their brother and sister leagues or teams. I'm like, that's fantastic. And
I expect a lot more of that. And the NBA and WNBA is such a natural ground for that to happen, since a lot of the teams have a brother, sister, or ownership relationship between them. So I'm excited to see that kind of partnership continue to grow. And maybe we'll have LeBron doing his 12-step skincare routine for us before it's all said and done. I would like to see that.
I would like to see that. Yes. You mentioned earlier in this conversation that you had some vibes, some thoughts about our trends, some sports consumption and activity trends during COVID, and that you had to convince maybe your editors about your theory. And that I had a question about how do you decide, or how does it get decided which stories and what data, what research you get to do? Because again, I've been fascinated by the articles that you've written. I'm like, how does she come up with these? Who tells her she gets to do them?
It's all kind of vibe. It's an art and a science. It's all kind of vibes in the end when you wrap it up. But basically, spend way too much time on my phone and reading. I read I have, I think right now, 38 news tabs up on my other Chrome profile. So I'm just always reading. It's the best way for me to understand what companies are doing, what's happening in the news, and then pair that with my social media consumption, what people my age, people that I care about are doing. And so that's where I get a lot of my story ideas. I kind of just have a notebook where I'm like, okay, another fixation of mine right now that I'm going to be writing about in 2026 is kind of just the college campus as content studio. I just keep thinking about really from the NIL era onward. At first, it was athletes getting paid to do brand deals. They'd film their ad at the football practice facility, and now everyday students, sorority women, average student, not just regular students, non-student athletes are making a lot of money doing influencer-ish content or just daily content as students at university. So that, not to get too off track, but I just follow all of the tea leaves, whatever I feel. I'll keep a running pitch doc essentially. I have a one-on-one meeting with my editor, my manager every week, kind of throw ideas her way. And we have a calendar that goes about a quarter out, and we have some like tentpole reports, like the sports consumption report that will repeat or that we know are coming up. And then I fill the gaps kind of weekly with other ideas. So as long as I can, my editor and I, she trusts me. I've done a few enough like of these weird stories, not weird, but just out there pitches now that have succeeded, that she has faith in me that, things will probably be of interest to our readers.
Like I said at the top, I've become increasingly kind of obsessed with finding out what the trends are, and then, having a discussion like this, like, what did you find fascinating about it? I think it's so wonderful to explore what trends are happening and maybe why we're doing it and who's investing where and why these things are growing. So the next article that you're going to write, it's the very next one, but doing the dive into what's going on in college campuses, I'm already interested.
Yes.
How do I get alert?
I will put some sports questions into that as well, for sure. So be on the lookout for that.
And thinking about your professional journey, I'm wondering how you even developed this niche. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so I went to college wanting to do like traditional journalism major, and my dad and brother got in my ear and they were like, you need to get a business degree, and like you already write, like dude, just write. So I just wrote for the school newspaper and like did freelance reporting and stuff around DC, and got a finance degree, weirdly enough, at American University. And I knew like I was never gonna go into finance or do anything like that. So the first job I got, I graduated, I was supposed to graduate in May of 2020, ended up graduating a semester early, thankfully, in December 2019, had a beautiful ceremony, the whole family was there, and started my job in January for kind of a market research kind of communications firm based in DC. So that's where I got beyond my finance education, like really familiar with data analysis and programming and all of that sort of stuff on the research front. And I worked there for about 2 years, and then they wanted to call everyone back to the office. I had moved home to Columbus, Ohio by that point. I was working remotely. I like being near my family here in Columbus. So I got a job with Safelite Autoglass for a year, kind of in their marketing department, doing a similar type of thing. But that was where really I had a lot of, my first job out of college was very intense. I was working like 70, 80-hour weeks. It was peak pandemic, very sad time, dark times, but at least it gave me something to do, if nothing else. But Safelite was kind of a little bit more free time, more of a true 9-to-5. So I continued doing freelance writing here in the Columbus area. And I started up kind of a Substack actually before Substack was even a thing back in 2021, where I would interview kind of like this interesting people that I thought were interesting about how they dealt with stress and anxiety in their lives. And I just ended up, happened to end up interviewing a lot of professional athletes. Buster Douglas, the boxer, lives here in Columbus. I went and hunted him down, got him to sit down for an interview, which was awesome. But long story short, I used that time at Safelite to build up this clip portfolio. And then an old coworker of mine from my first job told me about this opening up Morning Consult, where we're doing data journalism essentially. So combining my data analysis background with my journalism background. And I've been here ever since for over 3 years now. And I've also very fortunate that they let me do kind of freelance reporting for really truly sports focused sites like Front Office, like Awful Announcing. So that's been super fun to do as well. My dad, that's him back there. He's actually was a Major League Baseball player. He played in Japan for a little bit as well, but he played 8 seasons in the MLB. So that's where I kind of got my initial love of sports from. And he still owns a baseball school here in Columbus where he does lessons and, batting cages, whole 9 yards. So that's where the initial sports spark came from. But yeah, just kind of, I feel like so much of the world today is just kind of clawing together bits and pieces and finding something eventually that works for you. So I'm still very much doing that. I'm always thinking like, what can I do next? So, but yeah, it's been super fun so far.
It sounds fascinating. And I think you're right. I think this day and age, people are building careers where it's like bits and pieces of things that they enjoy.
There's no more just linear trajectory.
Yeah, you piece these things together. And I feel like you've pieced together. I mean, I'm not living your life, but I'm like, it seems quite fascinating to me. But thank you for mentioning kind of your sports history. The last 5 minutes of every episode, I like to ask these same 4 questions. And the first one is about your first sports memory, and growing up in a sports family. It's likely around your dad.
Yeah,
but I don't put it either a movie or going to a game, seeing your dad pick up a bat or a glove. What's coming to your mind?
I think like my first, I don't even know if I have a first sports memory because they were just like always there. Like they're just like, like my life has just been kind of imbued with sports since the beginning. And so I think like the earliest memories, at least that I have, are going to his, it's called Big League Baseball School. So he started it with another ex-MLB player. They both ended up marrying women from Columbus and met each other and opened this baseball school. But just like swinging the bat, I was in there every day after school from first grade till I left for college, playing, hitting lessons from my dad. I was a catcher in softball as well. So did a lot of that. But yeah, I think, and I did a bunch of other sports as well. I played golf, I played basketball, rode horses. So I was just kind of anywhere I could be on a field at some point. I was there, and very thankful to my parents for always being there and shuttling me around from point A to point B.
Yeah, you have to think the parents. I'm like, it's this season now. I need this equipment, and now take me here.
Yes.
Nice. Well, what about a sports movie
that
is your favorite, that you quote often? Is there one that's coming to your mind?
That's such a good question. I feel like, what's the one with Charlie Sheen? Wild Thing, or what is it?
Major League?
Major League, yeah, that's what it is. Because my dad played for the Guardians, and Charlie Sheen played for the Guardians, that movie. So I always remember that I was like, I really like this movie. I'm trying to think what else though. There's got to be more.
There are enough. I can tell you some that people have named.
Yes.
A League of Their Own.
Oh my gosh, A League of Their Own. Yes, that's my high school softball coach always called me Ellen Sue because he added that was not my middle name. Sue is not my middle name, but from the picture. So I love A League of Their Own. That's a great one. We'll go with
cool. Now, I also like to give guests an opportunity to shout out a person or people that have kind of helped them throughout their professional journey get to where they are. And it's likely for you potentially because you do so many different things. There are a lot of different people who maybe helped you along the way. So I don't want you to feel like you have to single it down to one person, but maybe just, I don't know, top 5 people.
I'll do a top 3 at least, but I think my manager at Morning Call, my editor, Amy she is the best. She's the one who says yes to all my crazy ideas. Really let me build up a interesting portfolio for myself. I think at Front Office Sports, the editor that I primarily work with there is Meredith Curtis. She has been super helpful in, helping me learn sports reporting, specifically what questions ask, what we're really looking for in a type of story out of there. And then I think more broadly, I played professional women's tackle football for a year last year for the Columbus Chaos.
Ellyn,
are you a WFA'er?
I didn't find this when I'm researching you.
I only did one season. I was the starting quarterback, though.
That's so gigantic. A couple of months ago, I know women's tackle football has been around since the 70s, and it's another women's sport that you have to go hunting to find where it is, what cities have teams. But I interviewed a defensive tackle for the Seattle Majestics and the Women's National Football Conference.
Okay, yes, those are the 2 main leagues.
Yeah, after finding I don't even know how I found Bianca, but I saw her in full uniform with her pads, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she like.
I'll send you a picture. I'll email you a picture of me in my pads.
And you were a quarterback. That's insane. Oh my gosh,
it was such a fun experience. I mean, I couldn't even we were full pads, fully suited up. We traveled to St. Louis, Detroit, Baltimore. We had 3 away games, 3 home games. And it was just such a cool experience to meet so many different women and kind of be, as growing up, I always played football. I always had a really good arm. Obviously, my dad's genes came through there, but you could never think like, oh my gosh, I could play football as a woman. It's just not like an opportunity. But I came across, and I don't even know how, I saw an ad for tryouts for the Columbus Chaos. I didn't even look into it. I was just like, I'm going to that. I dragged my dad with me, and it was such a fun experience.
Oh my gosh. I know I don't want to keep you for too long. It's the middle of the day. You have work to do. But if I could ask just a couple questions about this. I'm wondering, like, your overall experience with playing tackle football. Like, it's one thing to want to do it when you're a little girl, but then when you're a grown woman, and people want to hit you, tell me about that. Like, the mentality. Like, were there fears there? You're like, I'm just going to go out for it. Doesn't really matter.
It's so funny because yes, there were fears there. Like, I am the most health anxious, conscious person. Like, I'm not like worried I'm going to get injured constantly, but like if I feel like a weird twitch in my shoulder, I'm like Googling what's happening, what's the worst thing that can possibly happen here. But for some reason, it was like almost great exposure therapy and had helped me like get over my fears to just be out there and be like, okay, I'm going to get hit. My offensive line is going to protect me, but do their best to protect me. So I think it was great to just get out there and literally face my fears literally in a physical form. Because these women are big. And when they have pads on, like it's not cupcake, like, powder puff, it's full on tackle football. So certainly that was a concern, but I luckily didn't get any major injuries. And another thing I'll say too is just the women that play tackle football, we treat it, at least the Chaos treated it pretty much like a professional organization. We were together 5-6 days a week during the season, 3 practices, 1 walkthrough, game day, film. And everyone has a job. It's not like we're getting paid to do this. It's still not a profitable entity. So everyone has jobs, family. A lot of the women that were on the team were even older. I was 25 when I played. I'm 27 now. And that they were responsible for and taken care of. So it's really a labor of love. So it was just cool to be a part, like amongst a group of people that were just interested in learning something new, trying something new, and getting to live out their dream in something that they thought was maybe not possible before. So I want to spread the word about women's tackle football.
Yes, for the love of the game. Like that is so incredible. My last question about it. One thing that Bianca mentioned. She was kind of recruited to try out, but she was like the X's and O's. That was the thing, and that I had to kind of learn and get over, and I'm still learning. And I wonder what it was like for you. Were you a natural?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I like that I still am amazed that anyone plays football because really so much has happened. When you snap, like when you say, set hike, so much happens on all sides of the ball. And for any play, any pass to be completed, I'm like, wow, that was a feat of a miracle or God or something right there, because it's so hard. It's like it's learning a new language almost. It's not really, similar to basketball, I guess, in terms of like play just like general calling plays and whatnot. But especially as a quarterback, I was responsible for so many different things happening on the field. But yeah, it is a full on. We were studying before. I think the tryouts were like in October, and basically from October to January, in addition to just conditioning and whatnot, we were just like studying our playbook every day to learn something new. And like you're learning so much information all the time, and you have to retain what you just learned. So yeah, it is. But it's exciting too. I was always like kind of a nerd in school, as I'm sure we can gather. So I liked learning all this information, but it's true. It's like, it is an intellectual pursuit. People think of football as like this brute force of, will or whatever, but there's so much that goes into it that every player at every position has to learn. And it's like, it really is like a dance, like some sort of performance it's
an orchestra. Like you all have your parts to play. And if you're not playing together, you're eating grass. So the dumb jock football player is not a thing at a certain level. Like
not at all.
So much to know. Man, I'm so fascinated by this. Okay. So my last question for you, this show, She Got Next, really focuses on ways in which we can help and support women getting and staying in the industry. And I'm wondering if there are any particular things that you do to help support, again, women coming up in the industry to eventually take your place.
Yes.
At front office and morning consult and all those places.
Absolutely. I think the most tangible thing I do in my day-to-day is anytime someone reaches out to me, I don't care if I've never heard of them. They're I'm an example of that. But younger college students, especially, I'd say probably once or twice a month, someone will message me and be like, hey, I'm interested in what you do. Do you want to chat? And I always love taking the time to chat with them about whatever it is that they're interested in. So I think that's the number one thing, is just like saying yes to people, because when we were younger and in initial position, I still feel like I'm like in my early career, but it all, like, everyone got to where they are now, no matter what they do, by someone else saying yes to them in some capacity. So that's really important. And then I think also just showing up to women's sporting events, or just being part of the women's sports community wherever you live. So there's actually a women's sports bar that's in the process of opening up in Columbus. I interviewed the woman, the owner, for my story, and kind of, she still hasn't found a physical space for it yet, but I keep up with her regularly, spread the word about that, go to Chaos games, even though now I'm not a player anymore, but go to Ohio State's right near me. I like to go to a lot of softball games. Our ice hockey team's really good. It's super fun to watch women's ice hockey. So just showing up as well physically is super important. But, there's other ways. I feel like I need to get involved. It's time to get involved in like a truly organized women's in sports or sports industry group. But it's more kind of right now, at least, just the day-to-day things for me.
You've got a lot on your plate already. And I think the ways that you're supporting women in the industry is enough. You're doing enough. And I'm sure they're super grateful. I, for one, am super grateful that you said yes to joining me on this show. Like I said, I've been quietly obsessed with the work that you're doing. I'm going to be looking out for more articles, more research that you publish. Thank you again for joining me. And good luck in the new year with all the data that you're collecting right now.
Send anything of interest your way. And just thank you again for the opportunity. It was so great to chat. And I look forward to following you as well.
And thank you for watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, or following along on Instagram or LinkedIn. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe and then share the show with everybody you've ever met in your entire life. Until next time.